Ramadan is the month in which the Quran was revealed as a guide for humanity, with clear proofs of guidance and the standard to distinguish between right and wrong. So, whoever is present this month, let them fast. But whoever is ill or on a journey, then let them fast an equal number of days after Ramadan. Allah intends ease for you, not hardship, so that you may complete the prescribed period and proclaim the greatness of Allah for guiding you, and perhaps you will be grateful. Ramadan marks the month in which the Quran was revealed to Muhammad. It's commonly known that during this month, our Muslim friends will fast from any kind of food, drink, or sexual act from the time the sun rises until it sets for one full lunar cycle. This all sounds simple enough when considering the most basic description of Ramadan. But what is the true meaning of fasting, as observed in Islam, versus what we find described in the Bible? Let's start with the prophets. Ramadan is not a custom or tradition that was observed by any of the prophets that preceded Muhammad. When we compare Ramadan with the fasting observed by the people of the book, that is, the Jews and Christians, Ramadan really just becomes a rearranging of meal times as opposed to true fasting. You see, throughout the Bible, fasting is observed for various reasons. This could include repentance, requesting forgiveness of sins, mourning. It was also a way to make supplication to God, and much more. Fasting is done to deliberately seek the face and mercy of God, thus getting closer to Him. This is accomplished by abstaining from food, drinks, and all other forms of fleshly desires, not just sex. Furthermore, fasting can be done on an individual basis or in groups, and it can last as long as a day or longer as deemed necessary by the participants. When we compare true fasting to Ramadan, we find that Ramadan isn't really about abstinence or sacrifice. Instead, excessive amounts of food and drink are merely consumed during the night rather than the day. Ramadan really just shifts the times for having food, drink, and sex from daytime to nighttime during that month. This doesn't line up at all with the customs already observed by the biblical prophets. But this shouldn't be a surprise, because Allah's messenger said to me, the most beloved fasting to Allah was the fasting of the prophet David, who used to fast on alternate days. And the most beloved prayer to Allah was the prayer of David, who used to sleep for the first half of the night and pray for 1/3 of it, and again sleep for a 1/6 of it. The scriptures never mention King David fasting on alternate days or having an altered sleep schedule for the sake of praying. Clearly, Muhammad was totally clueless when it came to the topic of fasting as described in the Bible. Speaking of biblical prophets and the origins of fasting, let's take a look at the origins of Ramadan and how Muhammad developed his ideology of fasting in the first place. Looking back at Al-Baqarah verse 185, we are told that Ramadan is the month in which the Quran was revealed. By this logic, Muhammad should have been fasting either before or while the Quran was being revealed to him. Sahih 6982. He, Muhammad, used to go in seclusion to the cave of Hira, where he used to worship Allah alone continuously for many days and nights. He used to take with him the journey food for that stay, and then come back to his wife Khadija to take his food likewise again for another period to stay, till suddenly the truth descended upon him while he was in the cave of Hira. What I find really interesting is that many of the major prophets of the Bible experienced significant episodes of prolonged fasting, which proved to be vital to their ministries. Moses, Elijah, King David, even Christ himself, all of these individuals fasted as means of spiritual transformation and fulfillment before God. But the same can't be said for Muhammad. So we have to ask, when did fasting during Ramadan officially become mandatory? Fasting was already well practiced in the Arabic community, even before the rise of Islam. The pagans of Quraysh had already been used to fasting during the Ashra day, in the times of ignorance, that is, before Islam was revealed. Narrated Aisha, during the pre-Islamic period of ignorance, the Quraysh used to observe fasting on the day of Ashra, and the Prophet himself used to observe fasting on it too. But when he came to Medina, he fasted on that day and ordered the Muslims to fast on it. When the order of compulsory fasting in Ramadan was revealed, fasting in Ramadan became an obligation, and fasting on Ashra was given up, and whoever wished to fast on it did so, and whoever did not wish to fast on it did not fast. Much like the many other customs that Muhammad mimicked from the surrounding polytheistic tribes, Ramadan's true origins are, unsurprisingly, pagan. Muhammad observed the polytheistic Quraysh fasting on the day of Ashra and decided to follow these practices while also commanding his own followers to do the same. However, what's more stunning than this is the fact that even after Allah supposedly revealed to Muhammad the fasting obligations of Ramadan, Muhammad still declared observing the pagan Ashra fast as optional. It's easy to see that Muhammad didn't take abandoning all forms of falsehood and ignorance very seriously. But hold on, we're not done here. Take a look at this hadith. Narrated Ibn Abbas, the Prophet came to Medina and saw the Jews fasting on the day of Ashra. He asked them about that. They replied, "This is a good day, the day on which Allah rescued Bani Israel from their enemy. So Moses fasted this day." The Prophet said, "We have more claim over Moses than you." So the Prophet fasted on that day and ordered the Muslims to fast on that day. Can you spot the contradiction? This hadith says that the Quraysh used to observe fasting on the day of Ashra. But in this hadith, we are told that it was the Jews who fasted on the day of Ashra. So which is it? Was it the Quraysh that fasted on the day of Ashra, or was it the Jews? The answer is surprisingly simple. Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the Jewish calendar, takes place on the 10th day of the month Tishrei. The word 10th in the Hebrew language is asara, which sounds almost exactly identical to the Arabic word for 10th, ashra. Muhammad heard that the Jews fasted on the asara of Tishrei, the 10th day of the month Tishrei. He confused that with what the pagans were doing, fasting on the Ashra of Muharram, the 10th day of the month Muharram. When the blind leads the blind, they both fall into a ditch. When you fast, do not be like the hypocrites, with a sad countenance. They disfigure their faces that they may appear to men to be fasting. Truly I say to you, they have their reward. But you, when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face, so that you do not appear to men to be fasting, but to your Father who is in the secret place. And your Father, who sees in secret, will reward you openly. These are the words that Jesus himself spoke in regards to fasting. The Son of God teaches us that fasting is an incredibly intimate observance between man and God. Christ puts great emphasis on the spiritual humility of fasting, which is meant to be done without showing off or expecting a reward or acknowledgement from others. Fasting is an act of bowing to God's grace and recognizing that He alone is the sole provider for all of our needs, both physically and spiritually. Let's compare these teachings of Christ regarding fasting to the teachings of Muhammad. Allah's Messenger said, "Fasting is a shield or a screen or a shelter. So the person observing fasting should avoid sexual relations with his wife and should not behave foolishly and impudently. And if somebody fights with him or abuses him, he should tell him twice, 'I am fasting.'" It's interesting how fasting is used as a method of avoiding persecution by Muhammad and his followers. Muslims are allowed to assert the fact that they are fasting as means of making their opponent feel guilty, thus gaining the upper hand over them. Rather than accepting persecution and considering it an honor to suffer in the name of their God, Muhammad and his companions frequently used Ramadan as a method to avoid such trials for their faith. Fasting, as described in the Bible, is an opportunity to increase in humility before the Lord. It is an avenue by which we experience the fullness of His grace through denying our own will in order to acquaint ourselves with His. On the other hand, if you're a follower of Muhammad, fasting becomes a reason to avoid trials and indulge in one's own will and selfish pleasures during the darkness of night. None of this should come as a surprise, however, as Muhammad's revelations all came to him in the darkest of ways. And here is everything you need to know about how it happened. Happy Ramadan, and until next time, salam.